Welcome to the Wild Heart Podcast. I'm your host, Willow Brook. Here we explore the divinity woven into everyday life, the beauty, the grief, the mystery of being alive. Through conversations with wisdom keepers, artists, and seekers, we listen for the truths that crack us open and the stories that bring us home. In this first episode, I sit down with my Wild Heart co-founder, Mirabai Starr, and talk about ordinary mysticism, which is a beautiful way to lay the foundation for this podcast. Hello, and welcome to the Wild Heart Podcast. I'm your host, Willow Brook, and this is where we are exploring the divinity of daily life. This is our first episode, and it brings me tremendous joy to welcome my dear friend Mirabai Starr and the co-founder of Wild Heart. And Mirabai Starr, there's so much I could say. She is an award-winning author of many books, many translations of the mystics, and the author of Wild Mercy, her memoir, Caravan of No Despair, and her latest book, Ordinary Mysticism, Your Life as Sacred Ground. She is an interspiritual teacher around the world and has been teaching writing for over 30 years. And she is a dear, precious friend to me. And I'm so excited to see what conspires in this time together. Welcome, Mirabai.
Thank you, Willow. What a great idea. I feel like we're sitting around a warm hearth drinking tea together and with our friends. It's got such a good vibe. So blessings on this new venture. I think you're going to be an exquisite podcasting host, my dear.
Thank you. I'm so excited. And today, on the day of release, this is the spring equinox, and we're also celebrating its Wild Heart's 3rd birthday. So it's like a little birthday party around the fire with all of our friends and our tea.
Happy birthday to us.
Yes, indeed. Well, I think I want to start with ordinary mysticism. And I wondered, Mirabai, if you could begin by giving us an example of what is ordinary mysticism, either personal or just an example that evokes this sense of our life as holy ground, as sacred ground.
Okay, well, I didn't prepare this, so I'll just spontaneously respond to the Holy Spirit whispering in my ear. How about a warm bath? So in our house, when my beloved and I take a bath, it becomes a sacred space. It's like a temple, but not so serious. It's also playful because there are bubbles involved and music and candles, which are always an opening of the door to the sacred. I use candles for everything, as you do too, Willow, as we did together before this podcast today. You know, we light the candles and don't have to even say anything. It's like the kindling of the flame invokes the presence of the sacred. And the sacred doesn't have to mean God or goddess or any kind of personified concept. It's a presence. It's a reality. It's embodied. It's direct. And so we light the candles, we draw the bath with the bubbles, we pour a glass of cold water or fruit juice and we slip in. And it is a prayer and it is a celebration. It's sometimes quiet, it's sometimes a space for a conversation, what in the Sufi tradition is called sobet, that sacred dialogue. And sometimes it's not even about anything important, so to speak, like politics or grief. You know, those are 2 big topics in our bathtub. It's really a matter of showing up for the present moment without much of an agenda, which to me is ordinary mysticism. It's returning to beginner's mind, as they call it in Zen, again and again. Like, let's just see what this moment brings, what openings, what doorways reveal themselves.
So beautiful. Thank you for painting that image for us. I see it now. Your bathtub is so epic, as everyone who's seen it has noticed. And it actually was bringing back the memory of talking about the cover of Ordinary Mysticism and what images, evoke this sense of divinity in the daily life. And In this illustration, you've so beautifully evoked the senses. And I wonder if you would talk a little bit about sensuality in ordinary mysticism and mysticism in general, and how you see both the sensual and the erotic in that.
Well, it's ironic because every one of the world's religions I know about, and I was a scholar of world religions and a professor of religious studies for many years, which was an ongoing opportunity to learn about the world's great wisdom traditions, but almost all of them, I would say, emphasize transcending the senses, the body, and this experience of our lives here in this world. So much of religion has been to use spiritual teachings as a kind of catapult to send us up and out and beyond this world, that this world is a veil of illusion, a dream from which Shiva will awake and we will all be liberated. And so many spiritual practices and teachings and scriptures, belief systems are designed to convince us that this world is something to be moved beyond in order to get to the real world. And I understand it. This world is not an easy place. It's fraught with suffering, with loss, with injustice. And it's tempting to view it as really a way station at best along the way to ultimate reality. And so I think many of us now are reclaiming, or making an effort anyway, to find the sacred in the midst of this messy everyday existence, to lift it up, to bless it. In so many ways, this is an enterprise of the sacred feminine, that the voice of the feminine has been oppressed and silenced, marginalized in so many ways in most of the world's religions, probably because it is intimately and inextricably entwined with the sensual, with the embodied, with our experience of everyday life. And so a lot of spirituality has left women and those who identify as female out, because we have to be concerned with the body, with the family, with food, with sensuality, with sexuality, with the messy and the gorgeous aspects of being incarnate creatures. Our creatureliness is our spiritual path. And if that is denied, it denies us. And I don't just mean girl bodies versus boy bodies here. I'm talking about our feminine souls, which live in all of us and have been compromised in all of us by virtue of many religious teachings. So that was a long answer, but I'm very interested, as you well know, in reclaiming all of it, the hard parts as well as the delicious parts, as being the very domain where the sacred lives and is available to all of us.
Absolutely. Thank you for painting us that picture and really, the full spectrum, right, of where the senses can be so delicious and where they can really challenge us. And I want to go in both of those directions from here. But I wonder now if you would speak to us about mystical experience, because for me, I feel like more and more the mystical becomes so connected to the sensory that the moments that I feel the most in touch with the divine are the ones that I feel the most in my body. And I wonder if you would expand on mysticism as a concept and as a felt reality and how it also relates to the senses.
Yes, beautiful, Willow. And this comes back to your use of the term erotic, because actually, in spite of the fact that I'm bashing the patriarchal aspects of the world's religions, I also want to affirm the mystical treasures that lie at the heart of all the world's great traditions. And one of the most luminous examples of that is the love language that we find in the mystical traditions, the use of the terms lover and beloved. You know, last night I did a conversation with Matthew Fox, and he was talking about John of the Cross, one of my favorite mystics, and he says John's favorite word for God is beloved. And that's true in many of the mystical traditions. Why? Because there's nothing greater and more precise than erotic love language to evoke the relationship between the soul and the divine. It's beyond belief systems. It doesn't really have anything to do with what you believe. If you pressed me, would I say that I believe in a personified being called God? Sometimes. Sometimes I don't. But the lover-beloved relationship is central to my life, my spiritual life, my everyday life. So Teresa of Avila, it's interesting. She's, I translated her, and she's one of my top favorites. She feels like part of me. I feel so intimately connected to her. And when she spoke about one of her very first mystical experiences, it's known as the transverberation. If you look it up, you won't even probably find it. It's such an obscure term. She probably didn't even use that term. Probably the theologians that wrote about her did. But this experience was one in which she was in prayer, in contemplative prayer. We might call it meditation, because silent prayer was very much that, just allowing oneself to abide in a wordless state of communion, one hopes, with the beloved. At least an invitational space. Teresa would say, when I would sit down to pray, I would ask to be in the presence of the friend or the beloved. Again, both very common Sufi terms, the friend and the beloved. These are terms Teresa would use. It's not guaranteed that the beloved or the friend would sit beside you. Actually, it was. They're always there, but it's not guaranteed that the space would open to be able to perceive them, right? But in this case, she was sitting in meditation and prayer, and she had a vision. Teresa was a visionary. She had lots of visions and locutions, which were auditory visions, and she saw an angel standing before her, and the angel had this kind of mischievous smile. She says very specifically that the angel was androgynous, neither male nor female. I think that's important. And the angel was holding up a flaming arrow, an arrow that was on fire at the tip. And the angel, with this mischievous smile, loving, absolutely loving, delightful, plunged that flaming arrow into Teresa's womb and then withdrew it, and then plunged it in again and withdrew it. And this went on and on until Teresa lost herself in ecstasy. Tell me that is not an erotic vision. How the Inquisition did not condemn her for heresy, it's miraculous. I'll tell you how, I think. Because Teresa of Avila was such a compelling, funny, warm, delightful, intelligent, irresistible human that they just couldn't. The Inquisitors themselves fell in love with her and also became her disciples in many ways. And so somehow she managed to escape. I'm not going to say she escaped persecution. She was persecuted her entire life by the Roman Catholic Church, but she wasn't condemned as a heretic.
This image is bringing so much up in my memory of studying art history. I remember when I saw this sculpture of Bernini, Ecstasy of St. Teresa, and I remember when I went to Rome, I knew I had to go see this sculpture because it evoked something in my body, right? That erotic ecstasy that is also connected to feeling the divine for many of us. And so thank you for that. That's so juicy.
I love that you saw that statue. I did too, and Gangadas and I, my husband and I, stumbled upon it accidentally when we arrived in Rome and jet lagged and were just looking for something to do for a couple of hours to kind of get through the jet lag, and walked into this church, and I was like, wait, Gangadas, that's her. She's much smaller than I imagined, because, the images of Teresa in ecstasy, the Bernini statue, always seem so massive, but it's really rather delicate. Coming back to this question about the connection between the mystical and the erotic, is mysticism, you asked sort of for a definition. Mysticism is about a direct experience of the sacred. That is not just ideas and concepts and beliefs and even rituals, but an experience of the sacred. It's also about union and communion with the divine. And so that's really the whole goal of a mystic, is to merge with the one, to become one with the one.
Yes, and so much in Sufi poetry too, right? The lover and the beloved, all of these yearnings, these longings to feel that reunification. And on that note, so we just talked about the ecstatic, like yummy stuff that I think many of us long for. Like, how do I have an experience like that? I want that. And I want to talk about the other variety of divinity that you spoke to around reclamation of the mess of our life. And this is something you write about so beautifully in Ordinary Mysticism, and that is so much a part of everything you teach. And I want to know, personally, Mirabai, I don't think I've ever asked you this, maybe in this directive a way, but when did you recognize the mess of your own life as holy? And perhaps connected to that, when did you honor it? And maybe those are separate, but like, when did you really realize the mess of your life as holy?
I think when I was brought to my knees and there was nowhere to go except to breathe into and surrender to the mess, to the pain, to the disappointment. I remember this moment folding laundry, as so many humans, especially female humans, can relate to, those endless domestic tasks. If we couldn't find God in those, we'd be in trouble because we spend so much time doing those things. So there I was, folding the little tiny socks of my toddler and going, wow, this is hard. This life is hard. I don't have enough money. I'm now a single mother working 3 jobs. My ex-husband is a disaster. He's caused us so much hardship to my girls and me. And this isn't how I thought my life would go. I imagined some kind of sacred marriage with a well-matched peer, basically a male version of me. And these kids who loved God like we did and were artistic and oriented towards saving the world. None of this was the way things were. Everything was just hard and messy and broken, felt broken. And I remember that I felt like I had 2 choices at that moment. I could collapse into despair and bitterness. That was very much an option beckoning me. Or I could, in that moment, take a good, clear-eyed look at my life and go, okay, yes, this is my life. If I can't find you, beloved, in the middle of this, then I will never find you, because I have this feeling that my ideas about what spiritual meant, what enlightened would look like, what happy would feel like, are probably not real and not true. So I have to find you right here in the middle of all of this. I can't resent my ex-husband, my dad, none of those external realities, they're real, were the true thing here in this moment. Only my softening of my broken heart. And that opened the way for a kind of capacity for presence for many of the much harder things that were to come.
Yeah. Such a vivid image of you folding the laundry, the little socks. And I wonder too, if you can speak to us about how that's changed over the course of your life, or how it's grown, that capacity to experience the rough waters of life as part of the holy experience too.
Well, that was an experience I described of surrender, I would say, to reality. And that became a holy moment and a reference point, a watershed moment, a place I come back to. But that's more about anxiety and depression, how to navigate those. I mean, I know that for many people, anxiety and depression are biochemical issues. I'm not minimizing that. But for many of us, anxiety and depression are just kind of a low thrum in our lives a lot of the time. It's kind of a free-floating state that we have to consciously breathe through. into a bigger field, right? But grief and loss are much bigger and hotter fires. And paradoxically, experiences of shattering loss and profound grief are automatic tickets to holy ground if we climb on board. And I'm not saying that loss is a good thing. It's a terrible thing. And for those of you listening who have experienced great loss, profound sorrow, I bow deeply with my whole body in Danda Pranam, as they call it in Hinduism, full-bodied bow to you. It is harrowing and horrible to experience these major losses. And there is experience that so many of us have of detecting the presence of that which our hearts have always most longed for, the presence of the sacred, the fragrance of the holy, that kind of wafts into that broken open space, that from the embers of the fire of grief, the perfume of the divine emanates. And we're often like, what the fuck? The most terrible thing I could imagine has happened or is happening to myself or as what I'm witnessing in the world that is breaking my heart. And somehow, when I gently, tenderly, with great reverence, allow myself to abide for even just a second, a few seconds, in that fire of suffering, there is God, too. It's grace, I don't know, it's probably biochemistry, neurophysiological realities. It's all holy, it's all mystical, it's all divine, not either a scientific explanation or a religious one. It's all the dwelling place of the sacred. I'm a big fan of science. It fills me with awe and wonder.
Yeah.
That was a lot of stuff there, Willow. Sorry.
It's great. Oh, I love it. I love stuff. I think...
Yes, you do.
Yes. And there's such a relief in my body when I hear you talk about the fragrance of the sacred that rises from the embers of grief and loss. Because, when I was going through the greatest grief of my life when my mom died, I remember feeling like the grief drew me to the heart of my spiritual practice like nothing had. It was like there was no other option. I just had to completely get on my knees. I actually remember one image is coming to my mind right now, literally on the floor in my room, on my knees, just like, please, I don't know what else I can do. And yet, despite being a part of many spiritual communities, grief was so awkward. It was so, at best. And then at worst, it was just dismissed and shamed and made to be unholy. But there is such a rejoicing, dare I say, to find you and the way that you speak about grief as a spiritual path, about that reclamation, that actually walking that path in a conscious way can continue to open the door of the heart to the sacred. And that's radical. And that is really the inception of Wild Heart, of how we came to be where we are now, is opening that in our Holy Lament community. And please just share more about the sacredness of grief itself when it's been such a dismissed or shamed part of our human experience in the spiritual realm.
Yeah, I still hear spiritual people in Buddhist tradition, usually white men, by the way, but in the various spiritual traditions, dismissing grief as some kind of delusional state that we're supposed to wake up from, rather than embracing it as a hug from the source of love itself, otherwise known as God. So I think that when you and I connected, I sometimes have described it as the daughter-shaped hole in my heart and the mother-shaped hole in your heart met. I having lost a child and you having lost a mother, we recognized in each other that sacred wound, and we revered that in each other. And lo and behold, we have gathered, you and I, Willow, a community of people who recognize the presence of the sacred in the midst of the fire of grief and the truth of loss. It's not like we're using this as a spiritual bypass to get away from our feelings. We rather are bowing at the feet of our feelings as being blessing, a space of blessing. And so many people who come to us in our Holy Lament community and in all the other kind of branches of Wild Heart have also detected the presence of the sacred wafting from the fires of their losses. We're not unusual. And yet it does seem to be revolutionary, as you said, radical, to name it. And so that's what we're doing. We're naming it. We're inviting people into a space of refuge where we can all be present together in community in this sacred domain of grief and loss.
Yes, and alchemize the grief and all of the emotions that have been so outcast by the rules, right? Shame, all of these pieces. I feel more and more that like my spiritual path deepens when I say, oh, this isn't just a hurdle to get over and then I get back to life. This is a part of it. The obstacle is the way. The perceived obstacle is the way. And it is a deep way. And it's maybe not the way I would have chosen. And yet it is the way. And I want to say something to the people who are listening to this and saying, no way could how could this be sacred? How could my grief be sacred? How could the most painful thing that ever happened to me, that is the farthest thing from sacred? What would you say? What would you say to that, Mirabai?
Yes, my loves, of course. I remember when, I won't say the name of the famous spiritual teacher, but shortly after my daughter died, within a year or two maybe, someone sent me an audio recording of a very well-known kind of non-dual teacher who was doing a dialogue, because that's what they do, they brought somebody onto stage with them and asked them kind of what was going on, what is it that they would like to be liberated from, really, some thought pattern, some intractable pattern of thought that took them away from, quote, reality. And the person said, well, my child died and I just can't stop grieving. And then this famous teacher proceeded to dismantle their experience of grief as being illusory from a non-dual perspective and help them see the ways in which, by telling their story, they were reinforcing this false narrative of separation. And I listened to this thing and I wanted to scream. I wanted to blow up my car stereo. I think I was listening in the car. It was infuriating to me. It diminished and denied my experience of grieving my child as what I knew it to be, which was an experience that was the holiest thing I knew. My grief was my praise. My grief was my devotion. My grief was an acknowledgement of the most precious love. And so, for those of you who are listening, who are saying, no, there's no way that I'm going to deny the pain and the fucked upness of what happened to me. No, I am not asking you to. Willow's not asking you to. If anything, it's the opposite. We are bowing to your beautiful experience of grief, and we are inviting you to tenderly be present to it, to enter through the portal of your broken heart into the sacred wilderness. And it is a wilderness. So we're not offering a map through that wilderness. We're simply offering companionship along the way. I do not pretend to be a grief guru. It's like the last thing I want to be is to tell you what's true about your experience of loss. I can't see it, but I can resonate and I can love you through it and in it. And we together in community can hold you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mirabai. And yeah, in our Holy Lament grief community, we talk about so many of the different facets of the grief journey, like outrage, that disillusionment, all of the different experiences that we feel on the grief journey, in the wilderness, on the waves. They feel like tsunamis sometimes, right? There's so many parts of that experience, and we really welcome all of them. Thank you.
Thank you, Willow.
And I wonder too, on this thread of spiritual teachers sometimes giving us teachings that aren't serving. In your book, Ordinary Mysticism, one of my favorite sections is called Let Your Saints Fuck Up. And I would love to hear about your own personal process of reconciliation and disappointment with spiritual leaders and how you got to writing that excerpt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so like you, Willow, maybe you can talk about it a little bit too. Maybe this part could be a little more of a dialogue. I would love that. But we both kind of grew up in the counterculture world and in a countercultural spiritual series of spiritual communities. So my parents moved us from suburban Long Island in New York to Taos, New Mexico, via a year living in the jungles and beaches of the Yucatan when I was 11. And when we landed in Taos, it was really a crossroads, actually has been for 1,000 years, of different tribal communities, but in the last 100 years, different other communities, people coming together with different spiritual paths and sharing them in kind of the spiritual marketplace of Taos. I'm using marketplace in a positive way, as well as the obvious consumerist connotations that aren't so positive. And so I was exposed to many different spiritual teachings, and I met many iconic spiritual teachers, and they all were flawed, but we weren't allowed to see it. We weren't supposed to see it. It's like the emperor has no clothes, but you have to pretend that he's wearing a beautiful fur robe. And so that was very confusing to me as a discerning adolescent. Like, I can see the bullshit here, and yet we're not supposed to actually mention it. And it was across the spiritual traditions. A lot of it had to do with sexual assault. And I use the word assault not so much as direct violation necessarily, although that did happen, but just ways that often male spiritual teachers violated women, girls, and in some cases young boys in the name of spirituality. And I was a victim of that. When I say victim, I don't identify exclusively as a victim, but I was no doubt victimized by sexual assault by various spiritual teachers, including the taking of my virginity by one of them. Really serious shit. Even the teachers that I revere still, did things that were really inappropriate and harmful, having to do with a differential in our power locations, right? That they had the power, and the rest of us didn't, and they abused it for their own gratification in some way. So how do I see now some of these beloved spiritual leaders in light of their human foibles, in some cases, some serious transgressions? I recognize that many of them were given great insight and spiritual gifts. And to the extent to which they shared them with true generosity, they benefited many beings, and those gifts continue to reverberate through the decades and generations even. And I do not see any reason to excuse their bad behavior, even as I affirm and acknowledge the very real, authentic spiritual gifts they brought. Now, the man who abused me, I have a really hard time finding any gifts in him. He was kind of cardboard. He was kind of two-dimensional. He really just stole other teachers' ideas and tried to make them sound like his. But for many of the teachers that I still adore, their transmission was pure and real. And it's part of who I am now.
Wow. Yeah, it's so important. I feel like this topic is so essential to bring forward and to unpack. And oh, yeah, it's something I'm still doing a lot of reconciling with in my own heart. And, I feel like so much of it comes from this tendency we have as human beings to assume that somebody outside of us has it figured out. And they have all the answers and they have the golden key that's going to get us into the state of spiritual experience that we're longing for. And we somehow have this, along with that tendency, like the way of giving over our power to someone else. And what I love so much about how you teach and how you embody the teacher is that you remind us that no one is perfect, that all of our saints have fucked up in some way or another, and that the real power is in community and in ourselves. And to me, that's the real arrow, of really pointing to where that realization can happen for us. And it's so painful to go through the process of really waking up to that, of shattering the pedestal where we've put our teachers, where we've wanted to believe that they're perfect in ways that they aren't. Oh, yeah. That's a huge grief for me in my own heart, and a lesson that keeps unfolding. Thank you, Mirabai.
Yeah, because we have the faculty of discernment, installed in our hearts and minds, and we know how to see through what is not true to what is true. But seeing is the key. I think that a lot of our impulse to project wisdom and perfection, really, onto other beings comes from a deep desire to be truly seen. The guru is the one who sees directly into you, into your true being. And so that desire to be seen is understandable. And to be seen is intimately connected to being loved. We want to be truly seen and unconditionally loved. And the truth is, we can do that in community. I mean, we will judge each other and we will gossip about each other and we'll do all those messy things, because we do. But there's something about a circle of loving companions that becomes the guru, that with all those pairs of eyes and all of those hearts and all of those minds, we can be truly seen and truly loved. A complete and whole perception of ourselves is possible.
Absolutely. And there are mirrors everywhere to our own divinity and our own shadows. And I feel that so much in relationship, right? I mean, this is my whole passion for communication as a spiritual practice too, of relationships at the center. I mean, Mirabai, this is so much a heart of your teaching, is relationships and connection and being able to walk the path together and know that it won't be perfect and it will be messy. And we see that in our spiritual communities and all of our relationships, because they're real, because there's love there. And like you were saying, love is so connected to grief, and love is so connected to every way that we relate to each other. It's messy and it's beautiful, right? And maybe actually this was something I wanted to bring up, is that, the way you say beauty isn't always pretty. And both of us are lovers of beauty. We love beauty in so many forms. And beauty is a lot of things that we might not always associate with it. You want to say something about beauty?
Yes, to me, that is the opening to the presence of the sacred. And that might mean watching Willow arrange a vase of yellow roses, a green vase, pearl green, of yellow roses from that range in shade from pale to vibrant, with orange lacy edges. That, to me, that happened just a couple of days ago, watching Willow arrange a vase of roses, and that became a holy moment. Easy, right? Easy to see how divine that is. What about a child who won't stop crying? A baby. Okay, I think about one of our latest grandchild, who's 3 now, and she doesn't do this anymore. But when she was 1 and her parents needed a night off, and she'd come spend the night with us, maybe 1.5, let's say by 1.5, she was having a great time with Grandma and Grandpa. Everything's going perfectly. all day, all evening. She eats. Everything's just beautiful. And then it's bedtime. And we start to go to bed, put her to bed. She closes her little eyes. It's like an angel has been in the house, and now that angel is going to rest. All of a sudden, her eyes fly open. This happened many more times than once. And she looks at you like, who the hell are you? And where's my mommy? And she begins to cry. She just whimpers at first. And then you try to soothe her. But pretty soon, she's inconsolable, screaming her head off. So we have the great idea, let's FaceTime mom. So we call mom and dad, and you're interrupting them. They're having a night off. And mom tries to calm the child down, and the child sees mom on FaceTime, and she becomes absolutely hysterical. A bad move. Okay, you get the picture. How, where do we find the sacred in this desperate moment of feeling like we're doing it all wrong? We're damaging this child in the process, and I just want to go to bed with a good book and not have to deal. I don't know where we find the sacred in this. I do know that it's necessary to be willing to breathe into that moment and to say yes to all the contours of it. To forgive reality, as my friend Richard Rohr says, for being whatever it is, and trust that this too is the domain of the sacred. And the more we do that, like the more we practice with both the mundane and the exalted, with both the exquisitely beautiful, obviously pretty, and the messy, smelly, awkward, the more we practice being present with it lovingly, the more our capacity to meet those moments with an open heart of wonder expand. And we're able to, more and more. Not always, but more.
Beautiful. And that feels like such a perfect closing note as we leave people with that possibility to continue opening our perceptions to perceive the divinity in our daily lives, even when we're tempted to forget or wrestle with it or, be angry. There's so much to every moment. And thank you so much for paving this way for us, Mirabai. Thank you for being here to lay the foundation for this podcast, for everything that you are to me and everything you offer to this world. It's a true blessing to be in collaboration and relationship with you.
Thank you, Willow. I couldn't imagine in a gazillion years a more aligned and lovable creative partner in this dance. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And thank you to everyone listening, and we look forward to being with you again soon. Thank you for tuning in to the Wild Heart podcast. We're grateful to have you as a part of our community, and we look forward to welcoming you to a future event or a future podcast. You can find out more about what we're up to at wildheart.space. That's wildheart.space. And we look forward to being with you again soon. Much love.